Hey Fish Fam! Today we're going to be talking about DIY substrates for planted aquariums. Well, not generically I suppose. I'm going to be showing you what I use. There's a lot of information on different options for this out there in the various planted aquarium forums and things. A lot of people recommend Turfus, or some people say they've had luck with Special Kitty litter, although I've heard that that one only lasts for a couple years. What I like to use is Safety Zorb from Tractor Supply, and it is a baked montmorillonite clay. It is, I think, about $7 for a 40-pound bag, which is pretty reasonable. It's pretty dusty. You have to spend quite a bit of time washing it if you want clear tanks, especially if you have fish that like to duck in and swim off as a defense mechanism, like severums and things like that. I'm going to start this with having washed it a couple of times. The primary thing that I'm going to be doing in this video is showing you how I charge it. And what I mean by that is I'm going to be replacing the hydrogen ions that are normally attached to the clay particles with calcium and magnesium. The calcium is necessary for the cell walls and several other things in plants, and the magnesium is an integral part of the actual photosynthesis cycle. And if you don't have enough of those for your plant, plant growth stops. It doesn't matter how much CO2 you have, it doesn't matter how much nitrogen compounds you have. If there's not enough calcium and magnesium, nothing happens. The first thing you want to do with this is make sure that you wash it at least twice, because this stuff is very, very silty. This is the Tractor Supply Safety Absorbent. I like it a lot better than like Special Kitty litter and things, because it's a lot less silty and it holds together long term. After you've done at least 2 washings, you want to put enough water in to cover it up. The first 2 washings don't really matter how you do it. After that, you want to use either chlorine-free water, or you want to use a conditioner to get rid of the chlorine afterwards. Now, for good plant growth, you really want a good amount of calcium and magnesium ions bound to the clay. And the reason that works is it is a +2 charge on those, and it's preferentially bound over the hydrogen ions that are already on here. Now, it will very quickly pull all of that out of the water, even with very, very hard tap water here. It's going to be basically all gone within an hour or 2. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be adding some calcium carbonate and some Epsom salt to this, magnesium sulfate, and that will boost those levels and allow this to actually pick that up. I don't have any carefully measured quantities for this. It's just way more than I know it's going to pick up, and the rest is going to come out with the wastewater. We'll mix that up really well. Now, calcium carbonate is not really very soluble in water at all. So if you do this, you're just going to end up with this whitish, murky liquid. So the next step that you have to do is you have to make it soluble, and the way that you do that is by adding carbon dioxide. So I've got just some sparkling spring water. If you get sparkling water, you want to check the ingredients and make sure that it's just spring water and CO2. There are a lot of these that add other minerals or that involve quinine or things like that for tonic water. So you want just carbonated water. And then the extra carbon dioxide binds to the calcium carbonate and makes calcium bicarbonate, which is water soluble. So what we will do is we will mix this up. Then I'm going to let this sit for about an hour to let any CO2 that's in there interact with the calcium, so it'll break it down. Then after an hour, I'm going to come back and I'm going to add some nitrifying bacteria. That's an optional step, but this stuff is very, very porous. It makes a very good substrate for bacterial growth, so I like to give that a little bit of a head start. So this has been sitting for about an hour. You can see it's still murky, but it's not white murky anymore because the calcium is all basically dissolved because of the extra CO2. And when I move it, there's no longer any small bubble popping, so the actual CO2 is mostly either bound up in the calcium bicarbonate now, the water suspension, or it's come out of the water. So the next thing that I'm going to do, and And this part is, like I said, entirely optional. I'm going to go ahead and make this live material. So, I've got some ammonia. This is Blue Ribbon brand. I get this from Burns Do It Best. Any ammonia that doesn't bubble when you shake it is going to work for this. I don't know if that shows up. It just goes back to normal like water would. And that means there's no emulsifiers or anything in it that would make it clean. This is awful for cleaning. So, you don't need a whole lot here. This is a 3% solution. If you have something stronger, you'd want to adjust accordingly. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 3% solution of ammonia and I'm going to add 3 drops. That's it. And that's going to take this up to, with this amount of water, probably about a 2 part per million ammonia. Rinse out my cup here, because there's more than 3 drops left in here. It's worth interrupting in the middle of this and saying, if you used tap water in here and you used a dechlorinator, don't do this step because it will bind the ammonia and make it so the bacteria can't actually use it. So bacteria, I'm going to be using Fritzzyme 7. I really like this stuff a lot. It, in my experience, works much, much better than the other bacteria on the market. You do have to use a lot more. You know, if you go get API Quick Start, they tell you to use 1 capful, which is about 5 milliliters. For this, I'm going to be using 4 ounces. Which is about 110, 115 milliliters, I think. I don't know, I don't really do that conversion very well in my head. I'm just going to take this, add it in, mix it up real well again. Then I'm going to let this sit overnight. And tomorrow morning, there should be quite a bit of active bacteria living in this water. So whatever I've dumped in now will have had a chance to duplicate at least once, going on pretty close to twice for some of it. The slower growing stuff will only have a chance to do it once, but that should give me a good head start on this and give me a good healthy substrate that I can use in future tank builds. This is a step that I'm not going to be showing in future videos when I do this kind of stuff. I'm just going to put a link back to this video for people. But this is a method that gives you a pretty good, rich substrate. The calcium and magnesium that gets bound to this because it's a baked clay does a lot to help with letting the plants absorb ammonia and nitrites and nitrates from the water. I'm sorry, I don't think plants take up nitrite. I think it's just ammonia and nitrate. It goes a long way towards that. The calcium helps with that because it needs to maintain an ionic balance when it pulls it into the roots. And the magnesium does that, but it's also vitally important for photosynthesis. So if there's not enough magnesium in your plants, they can't actually perform photosynthesis, which means they can't actually use any of the nitrogen compounds that are in the water. So using that Epsom salt is a good way to make sure that there's enough in here, because even if you have very hard water, there's no guarantee that there's magnesium in it. The hard water tests check for calcium and magnesium, but it doesn't differentiate at all. So getting a good amount of magnesium in here is a really good idea. I like to start bacteria in these because it helps to make sure that the bacteria can get established before other bacteria take up a lot of the pores. Nitrifying bacteria are very slow growing, so any sort of head start you can give them to make sure they can take their place first really helps a lot. That's it. It's ready to use, it's ready to go, and I'm going to start using this tomorrow in some of the things that I'm making for some of the other fish that I've got. Anyways, we'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.